I request that you turn on your video. And if your video is on and your camera window is shut, you may like to turn it on too, so that we can acknowledge Long Paul as he's in the room and he's giving the desana. Okay, so Shun Xiang will lead us in paying respects to Long Paul, please.
Greetings, everyone. Please be Nanjali. Let's pay our respects to Long Paul together. 3 bows. Bow.
Okay. This is me, huh? Okay. Hello, everyone. Afternoon, if you're in an afternoon, and happy whatever time zone you're in. Let's begin with some quiet. Please sit in an appropriate posture. How you place your legs or your hands is not so important. What is important is straight back, that feeling of being responsible for your 5 khandhas, not placing responsibility on any support outside of yourself, and being clear about your motivation. The time meditation is a time of renewal, coming back to the real world, living so much of our time in the conventional world, conventional identities of being a man or a woman or a daughter or a son or a husband, a wife, a father, a mother, and so on. So we that's the world that we are living in, but it's not the only world, and we suffer because we lack access to the real world of the 5 khandhas. So this is why it's important to come back again and again to the breath. This is the real world. The breath entering and leaving the body, just doing its job, doing the thing it does until it doesn't do it anymore. And being aware of the feelings, feeling tone, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, with every in-breath, every out-breath, and the memories, the thoughts, the sense consciousness, all the things that appear on the periphery or want to pull us away from our present experience. And we just recognize everything just as it is, and we refuse our attention. We have the breath as our job, as our interest, as our focus. We want to stare at the breath and be super serious about it, but we can't be too relaxed either. And the art, one of the arts of meditation, is finding this middle way, the sweet spot between too much effort, resulting in stress, maybe even headaches, and too much relaxation when the mind just wanders off and we fall asleep. So constantly re-establishing that balance and just enjoying, just being here right now, just enjoying, appreciating life, meaning the breath, meaning the in-breath and the out-breath. Nothing else to do right now, nothing to think about, nothing that needs thinking about right now. And in meditation, we have all our issues and things that seem very important. but we look at those like all the belongings in our briefcase. And now we're standing in a lift. We don't have to carry the briefcase. We put the briefcase down for the duration of the meditation. We're looking for clarity, sharpness of mind, interest in the meditation object, curiosity, contentment with this work of reconnecting with the real world of the five khandhas, knowing Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vinyan, they're just doing their things, and we recognize, and we don't react, we don't get involved. We're learning how to observe and learn from our experience. So if you'd like to open your eyes and go to the meditation.
Thank you, Long Paul. We would now like to request for the Dhamma. The Brahma God Sahampati, Lord of the world, with palms joined in reverence, requested a favor. Beings are here with but little dust in their eyes. Pray, teach the Dhamma out of compassion for them. Brahmacaloka Tipati Sahampati Katanjaliyan Diwarangayachata Santi Dasada Parajaka Jatika Ese tu Dhammang Anukampi Mampaja.
I'm not going to chant because I have a little bit of a chest problem, so I'll just recite the Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang gunutarang pacayang namasami. So this is going to be rather short Dhamma talk, I think. We'll see what happens. So I'm reflecting this morning on the Buddha's skill in means and what a brilliant communicator the Buddha is. So one example I often bring up in Dhamma talks is how the Buddha approached this first desana when his audience were not in a very receptive mood. They were upset with him, angry with him, and were making a number of assumptions that, for example, that his abandonment of ascetic practices meant that he was planning on returning to his luxurious life in the palace, because they believed that there are only two ways to live your life, either the path of sensuality or the path of asceticism. So the Buddha starts off very skillfully by saying that the path of sensuality is a superficial, coarse, ultimately dead end, complete waste of time. So you can imagine that the five ascetics are sort of sighing with relief. Oh, he's going to come back, and he's seen the error of his ways. He's seen his mistake. He wants to come back and be our leader again. But then, to their total consternation, the Buddha goes on to make pretty well the same criticisms of the ascetic practices that they've been devoting themselves to for the past number of years. So if you put yourself in their mind, they must have been totally confused at this point, because the Buddha has just refuted both of the ways of living your life as a human being in the world as far as they knew them. And it was in that state, that fertile state of confusion and curiosity, just what is he going to say next, that the Buddha taught the Eightfold Path, the middle way between those two extremes. So here we have very good example of the Buddha's wisdom in taking into account the psychological state of his audience, acknowledging that even the greatest teaching, the wisest teaching that ever appeared in the world, most powerful teaching, if it's addressed to people who are not in the right state of mind, then no good will come of it. And this is a teaching which aims at change. It's an Opanayika teaching. It's a teaching that leads onwards. But it can only lead onwards, lead inwards, lead to liberation when the ground, the solid ground for communication between the teacher and the student is ensured. Another example that I'm sure you're all familiar with is the teaching to Angulimala. Angulimala, the serial killer with a lot of barami, but serious wrong view, serious wrong action. And if the Buddha had taught the Dhamma to Angulimala, just saying, sit down there, listen, this is the teaching you've been waiting for all your life, I doubt whether the Angulimala would have been able to receive it. But being confronted with this inexplicable event where he's running, big, strong man in the prime of his life, and he's running and he can't keep up with the Buddha who is walking. How is that possible? Again, he slips out. He's temporarily free of all those coarse mental states, and he just really wants to know what's going on here. What's this person got to say? And so the Buddha was able to give him a liberating teaching. One more example is the teaching of the yaka, alawaka. So what are yakas? I think most people think there's some kind of like ogres or giants, like Jack and Giant and the Beanstalk, but it's a lot more complex. The references to yakas in the suttas are quite diverse, and the whole idea of yakas as being cannibals with red eyes and casting no shadow, who they say in the commentary that yakas, the way yakas eat people, they just swallow them down whole, and it's just like a big lump of butter. It's like, and that's how. So yakas must be really big and fly through the air and eat people. But in the suttas, it's a lot more complex, and there are yakas who are, for example, sotapannas. And one day the Buddha, in his meditations, realized there's a yaka called Alawaka. So he has one of the best names in the suttas, in Alawaka the Yaka. So the Yaka Alawaka, or Alawaka the Yaka, was a person of some spiritual maturity, and the Buddha realized that he could, given the right teaching, realize stream entry. So he went to his place, and what this place is not really quite clear. It seems to be some kind of palace, or by the side of a big banyan tree in the town of Alawi, near Alawi. And the Buddha arrives while Alawaka's away, and he spends the night. There's a housekeeper there who lets him in. Next day, Alawaka arrives, flies through the air, arrives, he sees the Buddha, he doesn't pay him respects, he doesn't show any, he says, get out, samana. And the Buddha is so polite. The Buddha says, Sato awuso, or Satos, it's like Satu, and he calls him awuso, which is like elder brother kind of greeting. So it's like, sure, of course, well said, elder brother. So and as soon as he's outside, Alawaka says, come in, samana. And the Buddha says, Oh, yes, of course, elder brother, also, sadhu also. And he'd no sooner come in, of course, and Alalwaka says, get out. He says, yes, and I'll do that. He goes out, he says, come in. And so you can, I'm sure you know that this happens 3 times, and then comes in for the 3rd time, and Alalwaka says, I'm going to ask you a question. And if you can't answer my question, I'm going to drive you crazy. I'm going to split your heart apart. I'm going to grab you by the legs and throw you across the river. And the Buddha says, in this world with its devas and its maras and its brahmas and so on, I cannot see anybody who could do that to me. But you have a question, you go ahead and answer. So why did the Buddha do all that stuff? You know, walk in and walk out and treat him, because he's preparing Alalwaka. He knew this for Alalwaka's particular psychology. He needed to have that in the sense of being the boss and being if the Buddha had come in and expected to be treated as a Buddha from the beginning, it wouldn't have happened, we assume. And yet the Buddha shows this absolute kind of meekness and subservience to Alalwaka. But the moment Alalwaka threatens him, it's completely different. This whole different side of the Buddha comes out. And it's just this sudden transformation from this meek monk who's walking in and walking out according to Alalwaka's instruction, and he says, there's nobody in the whole universe who could just do to me what you threatened to do. So cool and so believable. And Alalwaka's suddenly, wow, you know, he really wants to know. And he says, and you can see Alalwaka, he may be an ogre or a yaka, but he's a pretty cultured fellow. He asks his questions in verse, in it's like poetic verse. So, you know, he has some education. And many of you may be familiar with the sutta, and if you're not, you look it up in Sutta Nipata. But so I'll just, for reasons of time constraint reasons, just the first verse, and the Buddha, and he asks these very good questions, basic questions. He said, what is the greatest treasure or possession in life? What makes you happy? What thing in this world has the best, most sublime taste? And what's the best way to live your life? By what principles? So really great questions. And the Buddha answers him in the same kind of verse. So this is like spontaneous versifying, and which the Buddha was brilliant at. And the Buddha says, faith is the greatest possession. I think there are other candidates for this within the whole range of Buddhist virtues, but we can say faith or sattha in Pali is essentially, in terms of how we experience it in our daily life, is confidence in our ability to abandon the unwholesome, develop the wholesome, and purify the mind. And as long as you have that faith that you can do that, you may not be able to completely eradicate unwholesome dhammas in this life or completely perfect. Or you can go part of the way. You can do some of that work. You can do this. You're a trainable human being. And that learning how to do this, training yourself in this way, is what gives your life meaning and purpose. And the worldly possessions and worldly treasures, you have to leave those behind when you die. But the virtues that you have gained through Dhamma practice stay with you and will support you throughout coming lifetimes. So it's a superior treasure. What's the thing that practicing makes you happy? Kind of easy one. This Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma. But I think it is important point to make that the ultimately liberation is the complete comprehension, the full comprehension of dukkha, which we usually translate as suffering, but that only the happy mind can penetrate, can fully comprehend dukkha. So we're practicing the Dhamma. There should be happiness, there should be joy, there should be sense of well-being, because only in the mind which is experiencing some joy and happiness in the Dhamma is able to fully comprehend and abandon the causes of dukkha. What has the greatest taste? Truth. And in Sila Dhamma, often the negative formulations are most common. We refrain from this, refrain from that, and in the fourth precept we refrain from wrong speech. But together with that, and nourishing that ability to restrain is the love of truth, and taking truth as a refuge and constantly bringing the mind back to satya, to truth. Such a wonderful taste. And when we're learning something, whatever it is, when suddenly you understand, oh, now I see, now I understand, now I see the truth of that. It's not you don't gain anything by it. It's not like a sensual pleasure, but that sense of being in alignment with the truth and no longer being misled or deluded. There's a wonderful taste to that. And Buddha says the greatest taste. Lastly, what's the best way to live your life? A life of wisdom. And Buddhism is teaching, sasana, which is founded upon wisdom and training ourselves so as to be able to use our wisdom faculty. So it's something to be developed and honed and taken to the level where we can clearly see the three characteristics. That's where true transformation takes place. But right from the beginning of our life as Buddhists, we're constantly learning how to be mindful enough to put down this grasping at the khandhas and identifying with experience and identifying with emotions and putting ourselves in a calm, clear, bright space in which wisdom can express itself. So these are 4 teachings the Buddha gave in this short verse, teaching of the value, the importance, and the supreme treasure of sattha, the importance of practicing the Dhamma, the wonderful taste of truth, and the essential, the need for us to lead a life of wisdom. So that's the short discourse to begin this afternoon.
อันดัมมยามโอวาดกถาสาธุคารังกดามาเสสาธุสาธุสาธุอนุโมทามิ
Thank you so much, Longpo. We present to you, we're not ogres, we're all human beings. Right here at your feet or on your screen, seeking for clarification in our Dhamma practice. So we'd like to open up the floor to questions from anyone who'd like to ask Longpo a question. You can click on your raise hand button and we'll invite you to unmute. So before that, Long Paul, we selected some questions in advance from participants to kick off the session. Thank you for sharing with us the 4 reminders the Buddha gave about the practice. There are 2 questions here relating to faith. The first question, the person is asking, how do I know that my Buddhist faith is the right one? And the second question is, how do we feel joy in the path of practice?
The first question, how do you know, is the right one? Well, that's a question without really an answer, I would say, because there's always room for doubt. How can you ever be 100% sure about anything until you reach arahantship, maybe, or maybe stream entry can say that there is certainty. But the whole idea of knowing, and what does it mean to know something, these are quite profound and difficult questions to answer, and I don't want to go into that kind of philosophical discourse. What I would say is that when the Buddha's teaching does what it says it does. It does what it says on the label. If you apply yourself to the teachings, the Eightfold Path, then you should see unwholesome dhammas decreasing, wholesome dhammas increasing, gradual purification of the mind. So if that is what you want, if that is your goal, and that you are committed to a path of training, then there are these signposts, and this criteria of the increase, decrease of kusala dhammas, akusala dhammas is one that the Buddha taught again and again to apply to every area of life. So I once gave a talk in a Jesuit university, and afterwards the rector, I guess he would be, and I had a very interesting conversation, and he was saying that he really appreciated a lot of what I'd said and agreed with it, and we were talking about the similarities and the differences between our approaches, and really it came down to the fact that he felt that human effort has a ceiling. It reaches a certain point, and at that point, the grace of God or some external force lifts you up. But you have to, before you'll be lifted up by the grace of God, then you have to practice and do all the things that I've been recommending people to do. He was quite happy with all those things. So the question is human effort by itself enough to reach liberation, or do you need at a certain point a kind of a booster or some external force to take you the last few laps of the track or whatever? And there's no way that you can say you know that truth beforehand. It's a matter of faith, isn't it? Now, my faith is in the Lord Buddha and in his great wisdom and great compassion, and I choose to believe him. But I can't say that I can prove that to anybody else, because it's only an arahant who can say completely, wholeheartedly, that you don't need some external force or blessing or grace. So it's a recognition. Yeah, you just have to make a choice. It's always a choice and a risk, but you think it through. And as I say, on the path of Dhamma, then there are constant signposts and things telling us whether or not what we're doing is bearing fruit. So that's unlike the faith approaches where all you know is just how strongly you believe in something or how many or how little doubts you have. But no, there's no way of knowing if this is the right way. But I'm a rather simple-minded person. I say whether it's right or wrong, I'd rather be wrong with the Buddha than right with anybody else. I mean, I'm convinced that the Buddha's right anyway. But even if you just say, actually, I got proof the Buddha was wrong, and I say, I don't care. I'm in his team. I want to be on the Buddha's side. I don't care. And that's my simple answer to that one. What was the second question? I sort of lost my way there.
The second question is all about how do you feel joy in the path of practice?
Why would you not? Why would you not feel joy? What else is any superior to this? Why would you not feel joy in abandoning greed and jealousy and anger and misery and developing wholesome dhammas? I mean, what's the option here? It's just joyful. It's just joyful if you open your eyes and you see the dukkha and the endless dukkha that is the fate of anyone who doesn't learn how to practice the Dhamma, and how the moment you embark upon this path, there is hope, there is a way forward, there is a way out of this. Simply recognizing that should bring up some joy. Recalling the Anusati meditations are often very neglected, and recalling the virtues of the Buddha, the virtues of the Dhamma, the virtues of the Sangha, this bring joy to the mind very, very quickly. Just thinking about all the great teachers that you've read about or you've seen on YouTube, or you've been able to pay respects to personally, people who uplift and inspire you. And these people are, in the Buddhist world, we know these people have reached and attained the things they have, the kinds of inspiring human beings they are because of the Dhamma that they practiced. And we're practicing that same Dhamma, no difference. That's a joyful reflection. When you open your eyes to the goodness and kindness of the people around you in the world, so much, and that's a constant source of joy when you see how many small acts of kindness and goodness are going on in the world around you. I'm not advocating positive thinking and looking on the bright side of the world. I'm just saying, open your eyes, just look and just see. So there are so many things that can bring joy to the heart in meditation practices, in particular the Anusati, recalling also the jaka, the goodness, the kindness and generosity that you've expressed in your life, or indeed that of others. Silanusati, if you're keeping the precepts and keeping them well, then recalling and reviewing your precepts, this can also bring forth joy. So it's just out there. Don't worry. Just open your eyes a bit, and you'll find it.
Thank you, Lumpo. Right, so we'd like questions from the floor. Yes, we have one. Jonathan, could you please unmute and
hello, thank you very much. Ajahn, so nice to see you today. I really love your book on love, which is the copy here, which I've got by my bedstand. I've sort of got a threefold question. In the Buddha's time, are you, and in the early teachings, are you aware of any descriptions of LGBT, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered people, and Buddha's advice to them? Um, and then with dependent origination, is there any reason why someone may be LGBT? And then thirdly, for Dharma practitioners, where there's lots of expectations from their parents, in Cantonese to be a house and day, a perfect son, or house and no, perfect daughter, who are LGBT and don't want to, say, produce a child or, meet family expectations. Do you have any advice? So this is a three-part question, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not familiar. I can't bring to mind any, the idea of people having like specific identities, like gender identities. That wasn't just a way that people thought about being human being in those days, I think. So these are categories of, obviously there must have been plenty of people who today we would put in those categories, but I just don't think that they labeled them in that way in those days. So that there was no specific teaching for. So that's my guess. There are sort of commentarial things. So this is like this is a level of literature and commentary, which is like 1,000, 2,000 years after, 1,500 years after the Buddha. But there's a famous story, or like I can't remember the details. You'll be able to look it up, about a man who's spontaneously changes sex and lives life from a man to a woman, lives life as a woman for a number of years, and then spontaneously returns to being a male again, which is quite a fascinating story. You can look that one up. I'm afraid I don't have the reference for you now. So my feeling is that gender identity and to what extent one's sexual feelings are directed to someone of the opposite sex or someone of the same sex or both or so on. For me, that's just sort of one part of being a human being. So I guess as as a Buddhist monk, saying, well, don't be anything at all is the teaching that I received as a monk. So there was an occasion where Ajahn Chah visited England, and someone had studied a lot of Mahayana texts, and then turned to Theravada and was confused as to between like a bodhisattva and an arahant and a Buddha, and and what is it better to be a bodhisattva or is it better to be an arahant? And Ajahn Chah said, don't be anything at all. The moment that you think you're something, then you start to suffer. So I would say, as a Buddhist, one respects everyone's path through life and the choices that you make, but to what extent you put them at the very center of your being as a human, suffering and finding the way out of suffering. So I don't really feel qualified to make very many wise statements about this, because I do live in a monastery, and it's very in Thailand. It's just kind of like part of the. It's never been a big deal in Thailand. It's like not a thing that you have to fight for your rights. And Thailand's just so tolerant society that they don't even have a word for tolerance, because they never had sort of intolerance in the first place. This is generally speaking. So I would say, in the meditation instruction that I gave at the beginning, recognize we live in a conventional world. Okay, so you have all these duties, responsibilities, roles to play in family life and in working life and social life. And within all those identities, your gender identity, your sexual identity is one of many. And so my thought is, recognize it, acknowledge it. No need to be ashamed of it, of course, but don't make it like sort of the center of everything and the sort of the focus through which everything has to be processed. And at the end of the day, you're just a body and a mind. You're one of the five khandhas, arising and passing away, and the things that that distinguish LGBT from people who are not. I don't know what the usual term for, I don't know what the correct term for someone who's not one of those terms these days, but it's just, it's a cliche, but what unites us is just so much more than what separates us, and always to see that as the background within which, if you're in a minority and you're misunderstood or mistreated, then of course, in the conventional world, you have to stand up and try to do your best and to live that identity you've chosen. But you should have the perspective given to you by meditation, where that's something that arises and passes away in consciousness. So that's not, you can't live your life like that high sort of very philosophical way in the world, but it needs to be there in the background gives you that perspective. Yeah, with parents, then every parents vary, even in very conservative societies, but I would say in most families that the end parents come to terms, because their love of their child at the end of the day comes out trumps. I mean, they have their hopes and regrets. I mean, I don't think that most conventional parents and conventional society is going to kind of embrace or be completely happy about child being LGBT and having to forego their wishes for grandchildren. So that there's a pain there and a regret there that I think you have to recognize. But life is not how any of us want it to be. And if we're very humble and we're not saying you should accept me for who I am, and not telling each other who we should be, just as they're not telling you who you should be, you're not telling them who they should be and how they should just recognizing this is difficult, it's tough, it's painful, isn't it? But see is there a way that we can get through this and live together happily in the short time we have together in the human realm.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan, for your question. As a follow-on, just a moment, Wen Long, just give me a moment. Long Paul, there's a question from someone, KW. He's asking, Ajahn, what does it mean when you say don't be anybody?
Don't be anybody. Oh, well, yeah, it means don't identify with being anybody to the extent that you can't see all the things within yourself and your life which are not that. Okay, so it's like, let's say let me see if I give an example. Let's say you consider yourself a very kind person. Okay, so if you become a kind person, then you often become blind to the occasions where you are unkind, or if what exposes this very strongly is disproportionate emotional reaction if someone accuses you of being unkind. So when you have a identity, this is who I really am, this is me, then you become very fragile and vulnerable, and you have to kind of protect this idea of who you are. And yeah, there's no peace, no freedom in that. So we take on conventional identities. So I'm a monk, I'm Ajahn Jayasaro, I'm this and that. And it's like playing a part. Yeah, you do it and sincerely and to the best of your ability. But it's just one dimension of my life. You know, being a teacher or being a senior monk. You know, it's a very, very important part of my life, but it's not the whole thing. And I close my eyes and stop thinking, and it disappears. And I think it's the same for, you know, whatever you think you are, whoever you think you are, however important or unimportant or lovable or unlovable, all those things, the moment that you calm your thinking mind, they just disappear. They arise and they pass away. So it's not that you can't be anybody or you shouldn't be anybody, but it's what's meant by that is don't sort of identify and create something out of these conventional identities that is not there by nature.
Thank you. I'd like to invite the next participant, Wing Long. Wing Long, if you could unmute yourself, Wing Long. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ajahn Jayasaro, for your teaching. I'm a fan of your Yellow Pages teachings, which is also featured in the BuddhaDhamma Foundation. I have a question in one of your jotting, if you allow me to read it here. Okay, you say that the optimist says the glass is half full. The pessimist says the glass is half empty. The Buddhist says that the glass is already broken. So in my personal question is that when it comes to, let's say, attachment, how do we actually think about this in terms of, like you say, because when you say when it does eventually break, we're not surprised and we don't suffer. I mean, because we are very materialistic in this human form. How do we actually live the way that you mentioned, that you don't have so much attachment, so therefore when the time comes, you know, we can basically be at peace with ourselves? Because like currently, like for example, my father-in-law, he due to old age, he's actually losing his mental faculties and physical well-being, and we're all kind of affected with it, because like we always tend to think of our loved ones when they are healthy and when things when they are aging. So how do we actually see this way that you say that, okay, see the glass has already broken? Thank you. Thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah, actually, I'm just looking at myself on the screen, and if you see that wooden pillar there, that's a yellow page there. It's
okay.
So yellow page. Yes, so the idea, you know, that sort of underlies so much of Buddha's training is familiarization and creating habits. Really, it's not kind of super mystical. It's like we have a lot of bad habits that we've inherited from past lives. I don't know how many past lives and things we picked up from our culture and our families. But none of these are an essential part of our life and our mind. And a lot of the basic kind of donkey work, if you like, of spiritual life is developing good habits to gradually replace old habits. It's as simple as that. So when we have this old habit of you know, trying to close our eyes to everything which is unpleasant and threatening, and things that we fear if we think about them too much, we'll suffer a lot and we won't be able to handle it. So there's a general idea of don't talk about this, don't think about this, it's morbid, it'll make you miserable, it's depressing. And the Buddha is saying quite the opposite. He's saying, no, you should think about these things every day, and familiarize yourself with these things so that it just becomes normal and natural. And so there is that chant that maybe you chant, Jaratamo me jarang anatito. I am of the nature to age, I've not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken, I've not gone beyond sickness. I'm the nature to die, I have not gone beyond dying. I'm going to be separated from everything, everyone I love. I'm the owner of my karma, heir to my karma. and so on. So these reflections are embodied in a chant, which you chant at least once a day, and it's just there with you wherever you are. And many people who learn these chants, and maybe you're one of them, find that words from the chant just sort of pop up into your mind at opportune moments in daily life. It's like they're just ready to be there as your friend and guide. And so the fragility and the impermanent nature of all relationships is something that we remind ourselves day in, day out. And then in meditation practice also, observing separation as just an integral part of our life. So first thing in the morning, you wake up, you enjoy separation from your bed. You have to get up, and sometimes that's quite painful. You don't want to do it. But that's the first of many mundane separations in our everyday life that we don't really think about it as like a separation as we do from, say, separation from a loved one for some reason or another. But it's the same thing. It's the same dynamic, the same process. So the more that we just recognize how life is a series of separations, and big and small, some are completely painless, and to the extent we don't even recognize them as such, others really, really painful, and just bringing this in, so it informs our way of living in the world. This is where meditation is going off the pillow and into your life, where these values and these ways of looking at life, looking at yourself, looking at relationships, becomes fully integrated into your way of being in the world. And then when you are faced with a major separation, a loved one, a family member, then it's painful. It's not that there's no pain, it's completely, you just feel blank. Of course, there's some sorrow, and it changes your life. If you've been a son and then parent passes away, then you're no longer a son in the same way you were. When someone dies, something in your life dies at the same time, so there's a profound kind of separation. But if you are constantly observing and being mindful of separation and change throughout your life, it's just more of the same thing. It's not like a totally different experience. It's exactly the same experience that you're so familiar with, just on a slightly more profound or difficult level. So this is how we prepare it. And Lumpo Charge and Cha will say, yeah, this glass is empty, this glass is broken. It's just like everything, just sort of a startling way of making this same same reminder that everything we use is temporary, and we, the user of all these things, are temporary. Every relationship we have is temporary, and we know that it will end at some time, but we don't know exactly when and how it will end. And these are basic truths of human life that the Buddha says, keep coming back to them again and again. If you're in a calm state of mind and you can bring them up into your mind and not react to them, then that's a very good way of developing it. If you find your mind kind of just can't handle that, then wait till after a meditation session where the mind's very stable, and then very, very calmly just bring up some of the, yes, I'm going to be separated from parents and from parents of my wife and all the people that mean something to me in my life.
You, Ajahn. Thank you.
Thank you, Wing. So I've extracted the reflections as Ajahn has given the 5 subjects of frequent recollections, and I've posted it on the chat. So if anyone would like to download it, you can copy that and download that. Whilst we wait for participants here in the Zoom room to put up the raise hand, one more, Philippa. Unmute yourself. Yes, please. Go ahead.
Hello, Philippa. Where are you?
UK, Kent, right now.
Okay.
So my question is about tiredness. So my work is quite physical at the moment, and when I sit in the evening, the morning sit is better. I don't know. It's like washing. It's like showering. You know? So but I'm usually quite physically tired when I come back. So and I have to kind of prepare things for the next day. So but it's important, you know, because what I do if I don't do that, I usually go into indulgence. So I go into watching something, you know, or which will make it even harder in the morning sit. So I wanted how to find, because it's about inspiration and faith also, if you get enough, but it's hard to do it when you're very physically tired. So I want advice on that, please.
Yeah, you need a physical answer. And one thing to do is when you get home, just do a corpse posture. Just lay on the floor like a corpse for 10 minutes, make it an alarm, 10 minutes,
Okay.
get up, have a shower, and you'll be okay.
Thank you.
No, I mean that's that one, you know, otherwise some yoga or some whatever works, but just a very short corpse posture can just take away a lot of the tiredness, and then with a shower as well, then I think see whether that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Paul, I'd like to come back to the questions that were submitted in advance. The next question here is from this person. It says, Dear Ajahn, we often talk about the mind in Buddhism. What exactly constitutes our mind? And how is the mind nurtured?
How is the mind what?
Nurtured.
Nurtured. Goodness. I don't know. I got a good definition for the mind. Let's just say the mind is knowing, I guess. Knowing through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, awareness, knowing. It's difficult with these terms, isn't it? And they're used in different ways, and of course in Pali language, then we have the word citta, and there was a long period of time where translators just couldn't decide whether to translate citta as mind or as heart, because of this sort of dualistic nature of English language. When we use the word mind, then we tend to think of the cognitive features, and then when we talk about heart, then the more affective features, the emotions. And sometimes mind as a translation of citta seems too kind of intellectual or cerebral, and you're afraid that the sort of the feeling, the emotional side is being maybe overlooked. But if you use the heart, then the sort of intellectual, cerebral side is lost. So when we talk about mind, then again, my practice always come back to the Pali, and what's the Pali? And mind is one translation of citta, and heart is also possible translation of citta. So the way that citta is used, again, is not so clear-cut because of the long history of Buddhism, and number of these technical terms endured an evolution or a change in the way they were explained. So you have the way the Buddha talked about citta in the suttas, and then the way that citta is talked about in the Abhidhamma. and the Abhidhamma commentaries. So it's not such a straightforward question in terms of what framework are we talking about? What is mind, or what does mind refer to in the Buddha's teaching, and what does that word mean in the Buddha's teaching? It can be quite complex. So I would just come up, what is it right now? What is it you know? And I would say it's knowing, basically, this sort of luminous knowing. I recently was talking to a number of medical students, and then I got back and came back to this old issue of the relationship between the brain and the mind. And of course, the materialist idea is that the mind is simply like a byproduct of the function, structure and function of the brain. And in fact, of course, that's just an idea or a belief. And with studies over the past many years now, we've shown how meditation can affect both the structure and the function of the brain. So it's not a one-way street. But anyway, there's a really memorable simile to explain or to show how the relationship between the mind and the brain. And in this simile, the brain is like a prism. So we know that when light enters a prism, it splits into the different colors of the rainbow, or the whole spectrum of colors. But then if the prism is damaged for some reason, then that will affect whether or not it produces colors or how the colors are produced. And so if we only look at the prism and the lights, the light that's different colors, that emit from it, then we might conclude that the prism produces the colors. And the reason being that when the prism is compromised, then the colors are compromised. But if we look at the image of the light entering the prism, like the prism is a filter, or something which processes the light, and here then the brain would be processing the light of awareness and giving all the mental functions. So that's just, I think, kind of, if you're speaking with very devout, committed materialists, this is an alternative model. The light of awareness being passed through the prism of the brain. It's just a model.
Thank you, Long Po. So there are follow-up questions to this explanation that you've given. Two of them, they seem quite similar. It's all about the theme around calming or centering the mind during unfamiliar, uncomfortable situations. For example, undergoing long surgery. For example, facing fear or sleep disruption, or the fear of aging. So how does one not allow these unpleasant feelings or bodily feelings to turn into negative states?
Well, these are two different things. The feeling or the vedana is one thing, and the mental reaction to it is another. And so with the practice of mindfulness, then we seek to allow vedana to be vedana without creating this negative reactions, which are all usually founded on vibhava tanha, this I don't want it to be like this. And that can be expressed as fear and anxiety and anger and hurt and so many different emotions and thoughts, which are all spring from this basic not wanting it to be like that. It shouldn't, or thinking it shouldn't be like this. Why me? And so on. And so being able to recognize the way that the mind is proliferating, creating all this negative thought and emotion on top of the basic fact of Vedana. This is the path of practice. Now, one way to do that is to create a mental state which is the direct opposite of the vipawa-danha, and that is a state of complete limitless, unqualified acceptance, which we call metta. So when you produce metta and project it onto the vedana, the feeling or the issue, then you are replacing all that vipawa-danha and all the secondary emotions which depend upon that vipawa-danha with this absolute unqualified acceptance. And when you do that, then the pain, the physical pain, remains. If there's a physiological basis for it, it's not going to disappear altogether. But the suffering, which is creating so much difficulty for us, disappears or is reduced radically. So understanding how we hold on to things, how we attach to things, how we cling on to things is not so easy. That kind of analysis is and if you're under a lot of pressure or the suffering is intense, then you usually lack the clarity of mind and penetration of mind that you need. So the most accessible and easiest, you can say, solution here is to develop metta for the pain and the difficulty, and to see what dissolves when you do that and what remains. So whatever comes up in our life, we keep returning to the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, that suffering can only arise when there is craving as its cause. All the other elements of painful situation, whether it's the environment or people's actions and people's behavior or whatever is going on, those are conditions, but they cannot in themselves cause us to suffer. They can cause, of course, they can cause great difficulties and hardships. It's not sort of overlooking how difficult they can be, but suffering only arises when the triggers and the external conditions are met with and absorbed by this craving. One of the three kinds of craving is kama tanha, bhava tanha, vipawa tanha. And right here is where you can take a deep breath and sigh of relief, because there's nothing and nobody that can make you suffer if you practice the Dhamma to the requisite level. And there's always something you can do, because you're not merely the prey or the you're not just completely vulnerable in every way, because at the end of the day, whether you suffer in your mind or not, depend on how skillful you are on dealing with your mind.
Thank you, Luang Por. Are there any more questions from the floor? We have time for maybe one more question from the floor. Anyone? Richard, if you'd like to ask your question, it'll be much easier. Could you unmute yourself, Richard? Or you disappeared? Oh, Malika. Malika? Yes.
Hey.
Yes.
Thank you, Ajahn, because I came to see you with Montera in September last year. And it's good to see you again after 1 year.
Yes.
Thank you so much for giving us your valuable time.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have this question about delusion. Which one is easier to see, Ajahn? It's in the body or in the mind? Can you just explain a bit?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I missed it.
The delusion. Which one is easier to see? Is it in the body or in the mind? Can you just explain a little bit?
Delusion of?
Yourself and, yeah. Delusion of self?
Delusion.
Yes. Yeah.
My ears are not what they used to be. Delusion. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's all rooted in the mind, isn't it? I mean, because the mind is the one which knows, it's the knower, and so it can know authentically, correctly, or incorrectly. And what we can observe, I think, is that there is a very clear correlation between the amount of mindfulness, clarity of mind, and the delusion. So when we see in times when we've been really deluded, then what were the mental states that were in our mind at that time and supported that? And times when we've been much more clear-minded, or that delusion has passed away, even temporarily, what were the mental states that prevailed in the mind at that time? So you can see that when we are caught up in things, when we lack mindfulness, when we're intoxicated by things, then we become very easily misled and deluded. But that when we give ourselves time just to stop and to be with body and mind right here and now, without any subterfuge, any kind of filters, and just looking at what's going on right now, then often you say, oh yeah, that's so true, or oh wow, that's I shouldn't let that go on anymore. That's really dangerous to me, or oh, I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. There's really not anything to that at all. So that kind of reassessment or recalibration, seeing things freshly, that's what we really need to be doing again and again and again. And that's the value of meditation, I think, just bringing us back, as they say, to because when we do that, and in meditation, where the mind just calmed down a bit, often something will just pop up in your mind, and it's just, oh, I really got that wrong, or oh, yeah, I really need to do this. It's just like giving your mind the opportunity. You know most of this stuff already, but you don't quite able to access it. So that's what meditation does. It allows you to come into contact with things that actually you know already, but you've not really been able to make conscious.
Yeah, thank you so much. I listened to all your talks, so so good.
Paul?
Yes.
May we have permission to extend a couple more minutes?
Of course, yes. If there's a yellow hand, I shall respond.
Yeah. Thank you. So, Bibi, can you please unmute yourself, Bibi?
Namasakang, Luang Pi. Thank you for your time and sharing your wisdom. We're very blessed today. I have two questions. One is about transferring of merits. Can we truly transfer merits to somebody else, whether it's the deceased or people who are around us? And secondly is I enjoy Uposatha a lot, and I try to practice Uposatha on the 4 days of the month. I have a question, which is because we already have a bed in the house, and we're supposed to sleep on something that is not so luxurious. Am I overthinking it, or is it okay to continue practicing Uposatha with the 8 precepts on our regular furniture? Sadhu.
Yeah, regarding the transference of merit, there is in fact a sutta where the Buddha was asked this very question, and the Buddha made clear that if someone, so it's speaking about deceased, if someone's passed away and they're reborn in a heaven realm or a human realm or a hell realm, then they're not able to receive the merit, and they don't, if they're in heaven realm, they don't need it anyway. But the beings that are able to receive merit as transferred are those in the Peta realm, in the hungry ghost realm, and not in every hungry. There are different levels of hungry ghost realm, and they receive it only if they anumotana in the gift that we offer. So the obvious question that the Brahmin, whoever it was, asked the Buddha was, well, what if my relative is not in that realm? And I hope they're not. I mean, I often say to people, well, I hope the person you're sharing it with doesn't get it, because that means that they're not in heaven, But so the Buddha said that it will go to one of your other relatives who are in that realm. And the Buddha went on to say that given the unimaginably long duration of samsara, that it's impossible. It's just not possible that there is no being in that beta realm that wasn't a relative of yours in the past. And if the one that you're offering it to in particular is not there, so one of the others will receive it. So these are the words of the Lord Buddha himself, which are recorded in the sutta. As regards people who, but I would say that that's not the only kind of reason to perform that ritual. It's just such a really good thing to do, and in terms of your feelings towards that person and the love and respect that you have, and sustaining that and making merit on anniversary, whether it's their birth anniversary or their death anniversary, where you invite other friends and family to come together and tambun and make merit. In terms of like a cultural thing, I just think it's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing to do, and something really to uphold within families and Thai culture or Buddhist culture. And I think whether or not that the person who's passed away receives it, that's only just one part of it. And as I say, I rather hope that they don't, that they're enjoying a life up in a heaven realm, or they're back in the human realm practicing the Dhamma. So the second question about a bed, yeah. So that of the 8 precepts, that's the kind of one that's a little bit unclear, isn't it? Because like a high and luxurious bed, and I think that I think it is good to not to sleep in your usual bed, just to sort of make it a little bit different from every other day. But it's not so much like the height of the bed or so on. It's just that on this day, you're just going to sleep like as medicine, just as much as your body needs to refresh itself before the next day. You're not going to enjoy the pleasures of laying down and in luxurious places. So it doesn't have to, you don't have to sort of sleep on a hard floor, It's not like a sort of a super ascetic practice, but just to make it something, this is something I only do on 8 precept, on 1 prat day or uposatha day. And so it wouldn't be like a major kind of fault in the uposatha if you were to sleep on usual bed, but I would recommend sleeping somewhere else.
Thank you. We're so blessed today. Thank you for your wisdom, Satu.
Yeah.
Okay. There are a couple of type questions here in the chat box. I think maybe if I can read it out to you, Lumpur.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, I have to do something. What do I have to do? Where is that?
Okay, maybe if we could do the question from Kay. Kay says, "Hi, Ajahn. I think everyone is overestimating the love of parents. Every Dhamma talk I attend that gives a simile about the love matter, the extension always takes a mother's love for their only child as an example. Unfortunately, for me, the memory of my mom telling me that I was born to make her suffer is poignant. Without describing more abuses that I had to undergo, I wish that people will acknowledge that there are parents whose love for their children are conditional. By not acknowledging those who do not have loving parents, we are made to feel excluded and sometimes made to feel guilty. I think people with strong ego will reject the Dharma. They are unable to feel the joy of the Dharma. They unsurprisingly have poor ethical values, and because of the strong ego, they rather reject the Dharma. Since picking up the Dharma, my parents feel that I am brainwashed. My Dharma sharing with them has not been successful. In fact, I feel they will reject the Dharma more now that I've taken it up seriously. What is your advice for me, Ajahn?
Oh, so if you're going to share the Dhamma, then the last people to share with them is your parents, or it's like way down the end of the line. Just practice on people who are easier. In any kind of traditional society, children teaching parents is a really sensitive issue. They don't have to be super egoists or like to find difficulty with child telling them what's what. So teaching, helping parents leads a lot of finesse and sensitivity. The point you made, I think that's a valid point, of course, and we know there are mothers who are monsters, and if even and mothers who are not monsters, but have very fraught relationships with their children. Usually mothers and daughters, a particularly difficult one. But I think that simile, one of the reasons why it's such a popular one is the simile chosen by the Lord Buddha himself in the Metta Sutta. And whenever you make a comparison, an analogy, a simile, it's always, if you can get like a 80% or 90% correlation between the thing that you're talking about and the image that or the simile that you create, you're doing pretty well. But you never get like a 100% correlation, which means to say that mother's love for a child is probably the most, the percentage of mothers who love their children unconditionally is high enough, to make it a reasonable simile. And that mothers who are not kind and loving to their children and make life difficult for their children or even abuse their children, we all feel these are like unnatural. It's like particularly horrific, isn't it? Because that's, it's just not what everyone expects of a mother. That's why it's so so reviled, I would say, and just things like the whole order of nature is sort of thrown out when out of joint when parents mistreat their children. So it's not that is every mother has unconditional love for their children. I can think of probably hardly any. I know a lot of mothers. I mean, a huge number of mothers, but I can't think of any that sort of live up to that sort of absolute unconditional love, because we're talking about unenlightened human beings with faults and flaws and defilements. So it's just it's an analogy to give you some kind of idea, of what metta is like. It's an arrow pointing to the moon, but it's not meant to suggest that in Buddha's eyes all mothers are perfect.
We have a couple more questions. Do you want to take them?
Yeah, go ahead. Why not?
Because I know we've overextended your time, but
Never mind. Go ahead.
okay, let me read it out. Dear Ajahn, when I do chanting in the evening or listen to the Dhamma talk at night, I can feel the presence of spirits. I tried sharing merits with them, but it didn't work. It comes to a point where I'm afraid of chanting or listening to the Dhamma in the evening. Can Ajahn please advise what I should do?
No, just keep doing. You just the Buddha said that one who has metta in their heart is beloved of human beings and beloved of non-human beings. So if you have metta in your heart, you have no aversion towards these beings if they are present, then they are looking at you with eyes of love. They're enjoying being there. There's how many people are chanting at any one time, and they got so much choice where they're going to sit and join in, and they chose to sit and join in with you. I mean, that's a great honor, I would think, and they must like your chanting. So I would be honored by this, and say thank you. And anytime you want to come, just sit quietly at the back. Don't disturb me, and you chant and you spread thoughts of loving kindness to them, and they spread thoughts of loving kindness to you. Well, what could be better? No need to be afraid. It's just if it is the case, and sometimes we can hear things that are not there. Maybe, who knows? But there are also non-human beings who are Buddhist and who love the Dhamma and who love to listen to the Dhamma, listen to monks giving Dhamma talks, and love to listen to people chanting. And I think that's great. I think it's beautiful.
Thank you, Lumpur. Okay, there are two questions that they are related to renunciation. The first question is, Dear Bhante, I'm in my early 20s. I was exposed to Buddhism during the COVID years. And after practicing Dharma, I became very dispassionate towards chasing after worldly goals and desires. I don't even find the drive to continue my college education. And I'm now planning to head down to Wat Pa Nanachat to immerse myself in the monastic environment by the end of this year. I have a lot of fear and worry about my capabilities of sustaining in the monkhood lifestyle. Please give me some tips and encouragement. The second question, this is, hello Ajahn, how should I know that I'm ready to be a nun?
First of all, when we first start to practice the Dhamma, maybe I started also in my teens, but in early 20s, then can see some rapid and changes in yourself, and the uplifting and emotional changes and things that you didn't used to enjoy, now you enjoy. Things you used to enjoy, you don't enjoy anymore. Dispassion and so on. These are legitimate, recognizable fruits of practice, but they are unstable, unreliable, and they can disappear just like that. This is the difficult truth. And monks can, young men and women can embark on a celibate life, living in a monastery, and find it all very easy. And also, what I heard monks say to this, well, I thought it would be a lot harder than this. And then suddenly, after 5 years or something, they hit a brick wall, and a lot of things that they thought they put behind them return. So we have this like karmic inheritance. So like old karma can just appear. It's like topography. If you were driving a car across the Great Plains in America and you suddenly came to the Rocky Mountains, you think, where does that come from? There's nothing in the past days of driving which would prepare me for something like that. It's not cause and effect, it's topography. And karma is a bit like that. And there are challenges when you're 20 and different challenges when you're 25 and other challenges when you're 30. And you just can't know beforehand. But monastic life, particularly in Thailand, is one which people are given the opportunity to participate in monastic life and to take on robes. And if it doesn't work out, then they can leave, and there's no stigma involved, and it's not shameful in any way. And you do need to try it out. So this applies also to the questioner. So when will I be ready to be a nun? Well, you need to go and spend some time in a monastery, not just for a retreat for a few days, but for a month, at least a month, 2 months, 3 months, and just have a feel for it, because you have a honeymoon period when you go to, when you become a celibate monk, you have a honeymoon period, and everything's wonderful for a while, and then a lot of old things start to reassert themselves, and old patterns that were suppressed for a while reappear, and you realize, well, this is a lot harder work than I thought. But that's okay, but basically, are you in, are you willing to make this kind of long-term commitment or not? Or are you more suited to practicing as a lay Buddhist with that little bit more kind of freedom and flexibility? You don't really know until you give it a try, I would say. If you feel that you may well have that vocation, then I would say go for it, give it a limited period, and assess how it feels. But whether to be ready or to be prepared, it's never quite what you think it is, and the things you prepare yourself for are often more easy than you think they'll be, and things you thought would be absolutely cakewalk, and they turn out to be the really difficult things. You just don't know. So I would say you prepare yourself by sort of being ready. You have your sincerity and your faith and your satar and you give it a try and see what happens.
Thank you, Lampo. Last final question. Dear Ajahn Jayasaro, I still have a lot of likes and dislikes. How do I minimize them, please? And this question relates to another question, which is, Dear Ajahn, do you have any advice for young people today?
Well, that's a big question. Likes and dislikes. Yeah, I mean, we're living in a world where people identify themselves and project themselves in terms of their likes and dislikes, and and so it's made into a big deal. But I think that likes and dislikes are, just part of the weather. It's like if you have kind of place like Thailand, you have people go out into the rice fields every day, and some days it's really hot, some days it's pouring with rain, and when it's very hot or very wet, nobody wants to go out into their fields and work on days like that. They don't like it, and they like it when there's a breeze and it's pleasant and so on. But it's their job, and so whether they like it or not, it just doesn't really, it doesn't lead anywhere. You say, oh yeah, it's hot today, I don't like this, and then you go on to the next thing, because you've got to make your living, you've got to support yourself and your family, you've got to pay your bills. So in any area of your life, whether it's in your career or whatever, notice when you're in that position where you don't make a choice, then the likes and dislikes are just not so important anymore. Yeah, they're there, but yes, so what? I really like this. Yes, so what? Yeah, I don't like this at all. Yeah, okay, so what? I mean, it's beside the point. So when you have a point, and when you have a real path to follow, then you don't have to suppress yourself and say, I don't like it really, and trying to tell yourself you don't like things that you do like, and vice versa. It's just that they're within a context, and they just start to fade away by themselves. They don't fade away altogether. There's still inclination and preference to a certain degree, but it doesn't have the power to influence your behavior or your conduct or your mind states in the same way as before.
Any last advice for young people, Luang
Oh,
Por?
for young people, yeah, young people, be open, be curious, be interested in what it means to be a human being. Look at your body, look at your mind, observe, learn. So much to learn, and so much wisdom can be gained by observation and learning. What really makes you happy? What really makes you suffer? What uplifts your mind? What depresses your mind? How is that related to your actions and your speech? What is the relationship between action and speech and mental states? How does your mental state affect your studies, your relationship with your parents? Looking and observing these simple everyday observances of what's going on inside and outside, and adapting and growing from that knowledge. And there's so much emphasis on the individual these days, and we're constantly being encouraged and compelled to compare ourselves with other people. So realize that's just not a very healthy way of living your life. So have standards, find what standards you want to live your life by, and then refer your actions, compare your actions to those standards, rather than the very fickle and unreliable values of the society we live in. I believe if you are developing path of goodness and kindness and sincerity, and in striving after the good and the noble, you'll never be short of friends, and they'll be good friends. And that the more work you do on yourself, then the more that will stand you in good stead, both in your private life and in your studies and your career. So these are words I'd like to share with you this evening.
Longfor, just as we began the session this afternoon, this morning, we put our palms joined in reverence, and we requested a favor from you that we are just beings here, not yakas, beings here with little dust in our eyes. You know, we pray and we ask that you teach the Dhamma out of compassion for all of us. I think many of us here witness your deep compassion and your wisdom for all of us, and we're indeed very grateful. So it has been a wonderful time to have you here this evening. I know I've overextended your hospitality, and we're all very eternally grateful. With that, we'd like to call the session to a close. We would now like to offer two chants. One is the Buddha's words on loving kindness, and the words on sharing and aspiration, and these to be dedicated to you, Longpo Jayasaro, to your well-being and to your goodness.
Yes, thank you. So I'll listen, because I don't have a chanting voice just right now, and I like to listen anyway. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Longpo, for your wonderful teachings. We now invite everyone to chant the verses together. Now let us chant the Buddha's words on loving kindness. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another, or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, freed from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of Death. May those who are friendly, indifferent or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless through the goodness that arises from my practice. And through this act of sharing, may all cravings and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana. In every kind of birth, may I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled.
So
Ready?
we'll now like to bid you farewell and take leave from you, Longpo.
Yes, give all my blessings in your life and your practice. May you be well, may you be
Right, so Brother Sun Xiang will lead us in the closing homage.
Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivadi Sawakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Three bows to Long Po together. Bow.
Till we see you again next month in October.
next month.
Yes, we're coming.
What day are you coming? I can't remember.
I messaged you again.
Okay. Okay, goodbye everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Longpo.